Physical abilities such as strength, speed, agility, endurance, and coordination are fundamental in sports. But mental abilities such as focus, concentration, motivation, confidence, resilience, and decision-making can heavily influence an athlete's performance, especially when it matters the most. If you want the mental edge in sport and life, check out the Max Out Mindset for Volleyball book and workbook or the Max Out Mindset for Softball book and workbook. A guide for coaches, athletes, teams, and parents to help you be in the best position to max out when it matters the most. Go to www.maxoutmindset.com.
You're listening to Max Out Mindset with your host, Dr. Larry Widman, performance psychiatrist and elite mindset coach to women in sports, business, and life.
Welcome to the Max Out Mindset podcast. This is your host, Dr. Larry Widman, and co-host Coach Jess Connect. And we always say we do this podcast because we've been blessed over the last couple of decades to work with some of the coolest athletes, coaches, leaders, and teams, and love to share what we've learned from them and what they've learned from us. Of course, whenever we have a guest on, we also want to spend a lot of our time learning from them. I always say my definition of maxing out is given the health, the talent, the health, and the intangibles of a team or an individual. Can they reach the limits of their capabilities? And then can they do it under pressure when it matters? Because we always like to say, if you can't do it when it matters, what's the point? We're really fortunate today, especially the last few years with us getting more into the softball space and how much we've loved that space, to have a coach on today who has crushed it in the club space and is making history in the college space. Club coach at Nebraska GOLD. She's won national championships for the under 16 team in 2015 and under 18 team in 2021 that was just loaded with recognizable names today and a whole host of Nebraskans. She's been the assistant coach for 6 years at Midland in Fremont, Nebraska, and then has been the head coach for the past few years since 2022, and 2 of the past 3 years, including this year, took her team to what I would call the College World Series. We're thrilled to have you. Welcome, Coach Beth Singleton, to the Max Out Mindset podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on here. Obviously, I've known you for a few years now. When you heard my definition of maxing out, could you share for our audience a little bit about how you think about maxing out?
Yeah, I think mine is really similar. I think it's when your team reaches their potential down the stretch of the season in what we call our meaningful games. I think it's really easy to perform, at a practice or to perform in just kind of a casual early season game, but we want to be making our biggest hits down the stretch.
I love that. Now, for those who don't know you or your journey, I gave a little just snippet of some of your coaching successes. Could you share with our audience a little bit about your background and what led you up to the time you became a coach?
Yeah, my journey to college coaching was a little more meandering than some. My personal and career mission has always been about empowering women. And so my vision out of college was, I'm a big believer in you shouldn't be drawing up the battle plan unless you've been in the trenches. So my plan was always to do direct service work for a while, and then to go into systems change, policy change, politics, that kind of thing. And so I started out, did a long time in domestic violence case management and advocacy, and then did some work in poverty prevention, resource management type stuff, and then some financial literacy for at-risk populations. And all the while I'm doing that, I'm coaching club, I'm coaching high school, I'm doing my lessons in instruction. And then when Coach Hurd took over at Midland in 2015, we had been coaching club together, we're pretty good friends. He called me up and he was like, hey, you've got a young family. What if we freed up some time and you did coaching full time and you kind of let that other stuff go? And I had to kind of reconcile that with my mission. But I think, we still are empowering women. We're just doing it with a different demographic and still being extremely impactful. So when he gave me that option, it was something I had to pursue just because I thought there was a possibility that was actually my calling, and been here and loving it since then.
Yeah, and been making history, by the way. The way that we connected, In to be transparent, right, was through the Play for Page 33 Foundation and through Barb and Jason Reesner. For the audience here, I think a lot of our audience is familiar with Paige Reesner and her story and her struggle with her mental health as an elite softball player and ultimately resulting in taking her life a few years ago. But her family, Barb and Jason, decided to start a foundation where they really wanted to, I think you used the word empower, but empower young athletes, really young people, but of course they have a little bit of a love for softball, obviously, and athletes in general, but to really help student athletes, but young people in general, understand a little bit more about mental health and the mindset skills that you can use to both help in performance and also mental health. And I guess my question for you is what impact has the Play for Page 33 Foundation have had on you and your team?
Oh, it's been huge. Getting your support, getting their support, and just bringing that dialogue to the forefront, I think has made our group a lot more open about struggles that they might be dealing with, about the balance of being a student athlete and the challenges that are heaped onto them. And then, something that you talk about sometimes, and I know Jason and Barb talk about, is that perfectionism, and how that can really eat at our athletes, and letting them know that it's okay not to be okay, and that it's not, that failure is part of the process and those kind of things. I think those conversations are normalized for us. And I think it genuinely has not only helped our team on the field, but it's saved lives.
Wow, that's pretty powerful, because Barb and Jason, like a lot of parents, could have gone a different route when you have a tragedy like that. And they've chosen to use Paige's memory for good. And I've been really blessed to work with them. And of course, we'll get into a story that surrounded that here and the World Series here in a little bit. But so thanks for sharing that with us, because it is hard to talk about mental health and suicide and those things in timing. Yet when you're in charge or helping to empower young women, like you said, you're bringing people in from all different backgrounds, different backstories, some with more challenging ones, some with trauma in their history, some with mental health in their history. And so it's so cool that you said that, because I think we're in full alignment that our belief is that we have this ability between, especially with 15 to 22-year-old women, this ability to empower them in such a way that by the time they get out of college, they know within reason that they can do anything they put their mind to. And I always say, more importantly, that they know how they want to be treated by others and aren't willing to accept anything less. And being on teams provides some of those opportunities to have those challenging discussions and hard talks. And so I've always been appreciative of you and how much you've allowed us to come into your world, to your team, and work together on a common mission. It just happens that they perform extremely well on the softball field as well, which is a tribute to the coaches and the athletes. Coach Jess, you've obviously been listening. I know your mind is percolating with things already. What kind of thoughts do you have or questions?
I think you mentioned it too, right? You're erasing that negative stigma around mental health. And so we just thank you for being one example of many in the sports field. And you mentioned another word, perfectionism. And I know we'll probably dive into it, but why not now? When you look at some of your top performing teams, and we think of things in mistake recovery, and sometimes perfectionism allows us to stay in the mistake a little bit longer than we'd like to, limiting physical performance. With your high level athletes, what is one strategy or skill that is used to help them move on from that mistake? And I would say probably, where's the struggle at as well?
I think for us, something we do well is we individualize our strategies. Like what is going to work for one athlete is going to set off or, spiral another athlete. And so we do a lot of dialogue as a team about tell your teammates what your reset strategy is. Tell your teammates what you don't need in the moment, right? Some of us need physical touch. We need a high five. Some of us, that will absolutely set us off. And then our team did an excellent job the last few years of honoring those things. Because some people's reset strategies and rebounds look strange from the outside, or maybe are different than what we've been told was okay in the past. Some coaches don't like players to show emotion after mistakes. But if you limit that, you're limiting their ability to rebound. So I think we individualize it really well, and the girls are bought into that and the coaches are bought into that. And I think that allows them to find their own when, again, we're talking about these being softball strategies, but also life strategies. We want them to have something that they'll be equipped with for life too.
Mm-hmm. Is there a strategy that sticks out to you that you can remember that's been successful over maybe 5 or 6 athletes? And you said it was individual, but maybe there's one that's similar.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we'll use words, like flush it, things like that. That hasn't been one for us. Specifically, we've had some dugout props. Dolls for a while was a big thing for us that we're able to, again, physically maybe let you reset. I think that had helped the group really well. Our group prior to this one really enjoyed that as their reset strategy.
You're smiling like, doll. What are we talking about here?
Very creepy dolls. Actually, they found some dolls at the secondhand store that they would write different phrases on that were either motivating or resetting. They took some physical aggression out on said dolls, and then they sit in my office. And I have a 7-year-old daughter who was much younger at the time, and they terrify her. So they make me giggle a little bit because they are a little bit creepy, but they worked for that group, and that group had character, and that was exactly what they needed.
And I love that you're detailed. It's not going to work for everyone, but it worked for your team. It worked for a set group of athletes. And I think the key thing that sticks out to me is that they were open-minded to start using some of these strategies. And if it was in a doll or a phrase, I know, Doc, we talked about it all the time, as long as they're aware and they can apply a strategy. And we can do that consistently over time. That's key. So those are some of my thoughts.
I love that. Coach, in the intro, I mentioned that you had 2 different teams win national championships in club. You've had 2 teams go to the World Series. So I know you've had 2 teams completely approach max out, maybe even more, because not every team's max out is to get there. Can you share just a couple common themes that maybe overlap even with club and college that you have seen in your softball teams that have found a way to max out when it matters?
I think toughness, grit is the word I use, but toughness is one of them. I mean, there's always going to be struggle no matter how talented you are. And the ability to deal with struggle and to deal with failure in our game, it's constant. So I think that's a big one. And both mental and physical toughness, I think, is important because the club season's a long one. The college season's a long one. You're going to get to a point in the season where you're not at 100%, but you still have to be able to find a way to succeed. I think those teams all had that. And then they were also competitors. I think that's a really important one as well. That isn't maybe as obvious. Like, we assume that people that are in the sports space are there to compete, but so many people are kind of okay with being average, and those groups were not okay with being average. They were always pushing themselves to max out and to win at everything they did.
I love that. Now, of course, some years we are blessed with more talent than others, right? And we are given the card that we're dealt. You had a team, your under 18 team a few years ago that had the likes of Jordy Ball, Ruby Malin. God, there were some other great ones, right? Dumont and Sharecki and all these names. Names that are big in the softball world in college right now. And what was it like to coach a team like that? And then how were you able to get a team like that still to come together and perform at the highest level under pressure, even with all that talent?
I mean, that's a special team. Like you said, it was full of 1%ers. It was full of high-level athletes. There are different challenges with that kind of group because, especially in our area in club, those players would have never not played. They would have never had to been a role player. They would have all those things that we talk about and we try to prep those kids for going into college. They were going to deal with it on this club team for the very first time. So that really, stressed the manager side of my coaching, making sure that we were picking the right people, doing the right matchups, but also just managing how players were handling being role players, how keeping them ready in the moment, those kind of things. And I think we did it really well because we were very strategic with our subbing. We were able to match our strengths against opponents' strengths, and we were able to let that group know that that's what was happening. It wasn't that we devalue you here, but this is a speed game. We're going to put our speed kids on the field. This is a power game. We're going to go, all strong bats or whatever the matchups were. And we were pretty transparent with the players about what we were looking for and what we were trying to do. And then they were just all so bought in on the one goal of being the best team they could be, honestly, for Nebraska. They were very proud of playing for a home state team and a region team versus being a hired gun for one of the California clubs.
I love that. So many cool things that you brought up. You brought up role clarity. We were transparent as coaches about things, and we also explained the power of depth and strategy. And of course, you brought up the word role acceptance, which is kind of what I was hoping you would go with that, because it leads to something. I know you know where I'm going with this, but when you guys made the World Series, or it might have been in the first time you knocked off the team from Oregon that was ranked number 2 this year, to put yourself in a position to go to the World Series, you sent me a text and you said that you had a Jason Green moment on your team. Now, for my audience, they know that, I helped a little bit with Creighton men's basketball over the years, and there was an athlete there, still their name, Jason Green, and I've shown a video of him from the prior year, where Coach McDermott talked to the locker room after they had pulled off a double overtime win over Oregon, another Oregon team, to go to the Sweet 16. And he talked to Jason about Jason not having the role he wanted that year. Jason had broken his hand prior to the season and not having maybe the role he wanted, but that when he was asked to come in and save the day against Oregon to go to the Sweet 16, he delivered. And he said, can you be ready for your moment? And when your moment comes, you delivered. And that was something that resonated with your team. Could you tell us who had that Jason Green moment? And because I think every team has somebody like that, and the successful teams have kids that can buy into their role even if they're disappointed, and then when their numbers call, they deliver. Could you share with us what that involved?
Yeah, so we have a senior, Asia Henderson, who had always kind of been the next man up. She'd been our pinch hitter for her first 3 years. She'd gotten chances, but they weren't, big time chances in the outfield, and we were just extremely loaded with talent. And so everyone thought that this was going to be her year. She was going to, have that breakout season. And she got starts at the beginning of the year, just couldn't find the consistency. So again, kind of regulated to that pinch hitter role. And then in that first game in Oregon, our starting center fielder dives headfirst into first base, cuts her finger to the bone. She had to go immediately to the emergency room and get that stitched up. And so Asia was called in and played the remainder of that game. And then in the very next game, we had a lead. We gave it away. We were down by 1 going into our last at bat. And they walked the batter in front of her in a tie game to get to her. And Asia delivers a 3-run out of the field home run. And it was just such a made for TV moment. It was a little bit surreal and well deserved, because she had always just done whatever the team needed of her. It was one of those special moments this year for sure.
Last thing tied to that, what did Asia do so well during the course of the season that allowed her to be ready for that moment when her moment came? Because it wasn't guaranteed, that moment, but it did come. What did she do that could be a great lesson or understanding for other athletes or coaches that are listening? What did she do to be ready for her moment?
I think something we talk about that she really bought into is we talk about the only day you have to accept your role is game day. And she continued competing as though she was a starter at practice. She continued practicing as though she was going to get those reps. Never took a mental rep off, never took a physical rep off, really just kept working. And so then when that chance came, she was still 100% ready.
I love that. Because this year, Coach, it's really not for teams that I work with today. It's not going to be, can you be Jason tonight? It's going to be, can you be Asia? And I've already met with a couple softball teams and did a little damage to the story. It was close. I knew it was a 3-run homer. I thought maybe your teammate had a concussion but tore her fingers. I know more of that story, but the basis is real. But now I've been asking some of these elite softball clubs, who's going to be Asia today? Because when you're on an elite club team similar to your team at Midland, there's a lot of great players who are on the bench right now that may not want to be or may not have the exact role they want. So for this year, for many reasons, I'm going to honor Asia as that challenge to all the high school and college teams. Can you be ready for your moment like Asia? Jess, those are our favorite stories. Not everybody gets a storybook ending, but there are reasons why people are ready for those moments, and they're our favorite when somebody delivers. And when I got that text from you, those are the ones that get me emotional. So, Jess, what are your thoughts?
In those moments, and if you can remember back to conversations with that athlete, were there nerves? Was there composure? What were some key things leading up to that big moment that prepped her and allowed her to show up when the team needed her?
I think there was composure. I think, she didn't let her confidence be wavered by the fact that she wasn't a starter. Like, Asia always believed in Asia. She knew she had the ability. She would advocate for herself in a very positive way. Like, it was never a question in her mind whether she could do it. It was just, again, am I going to get that opportunity? Is it going to be needed for the team to max out? And so I think confidence is a huge piece there. Just, you aren't your skill, you aren't softball, right? Like, it's bigger than that. And she always believed in herself. And I think that made it easy for her to step up in that moment.
Mm-hmm. You just hit, on a huge moment. How do I not let the outcome of performance, right, dictate my confidence? And so prior to that, in your one-on-one conversations, your role clarity conversations, what did she do really, really well when she wasn't named a starter? Or maybe she started to feel like, wow, maybe the role I thought I had, it just looks different. What are some key things she did well to own her role?
I think she clarified. I think that's important, right? I think understanding we need different things from different athletes, right? Softball has different roles. She's a very strong, powerful athlete. We didn't need her to hit 500. We didn't need her on base all the time. We needed her to come in and take big swings. And then her moment called for a big swing. So I think she was always asking questions about that, wanting clarification, wanting direction on what she could do better to help the team. And again, those are scary conversations, right? Going in and talking to a coach, especially when you might not like the answers you're getting, or you might not like the outcome of the answers you're getting. But she wasn't afraid to have those conversations, and she handled them so maturely. I think that was a huge piece.
Yeah, last question on this topic, because I like it. Working with a lot of athletes one-on-one or team-based, from a coach's standpoint, what's an appropriate and respectful way to ask for role clarity?
I think it's having those one-on-one conversations, right? Knowing the moment, right? They shouldn't be in the moment. They shouldn't be at the game. But if your coach is truly trying to max out the team and doing the right things for the team, they're going to have reasons, and they're going to have information for you. And so asking for those one-on-one meetings, getting in that extra work, those kind of things, those shouldn't be threatening to coaches. Those should be actually exciting to coaches, because they allow them to have a more direct relationship with you, and to help you expand your role on the team.
For our athletes, getting curious in the right appropriate time, coach has an open door policy, ask the questions of how can you earn an opportunity, and then when that role is given, accept it and be team oriented is what I heard.
Absolutely. Yep.
Wow. Coach, this question requires you to compliment yourself. I'm not sure that's something you like to do, but one of the things that I feel that coaches do really well, the best coaches, is they find a way to impart confidence in their athletes. What do you do so well that has allowed you to have success at the club and college level to impart confidence in the athletes that you coach?
I think it's, number one, meeting them where they're at, right? You can't expect them to perform a super advanced skill when you haven't met them at the basic skill where they're at. And then I think it's also matching them up to roles and activities that meet their strengths, right? If I try to get my speed kid to hit 10 home runs a year, she's never going to have confidence, because that's not within her skill set and her strengths. I think it's finding things that match their strengths and then building on that rather than focusing on deficits.
Oh, wow, succinct, and I love that. So, all right, so tell us a little bit about, when you think about it, like, what's one of the biggest challenges that you've had as your coaching career has evolved? What's a big challenge for you day to day as a coach?
I think one of my biggest challenges is kind of the 10-80-10 rule, right? With my background, I want to save everyone. I want to help everyone. And if you take too long focusing on that 10% that doesn't want the help or that's pulling in the wrong direction, you're going to lose that top end, you're going to lose the middle. And so for me, it's making sure that we're giving the right attention and focus to everyone, but at the same time, not losing the team focus and keeping everything right there and not trying to, essentially save everyone if they don't want to be saved kind of situation. I think that's really hard for me. I think I've gotten better at it, but it's at the same time continues to be a little bit of a struggle.
Are there any other things that create discomfort for you as a coach?
There's really not a lot. I love it, right? I love relationships, things like that. I think, at a small school like ours, we do have high roster numbers. That is a challenge because it is harder to create meaningful relationships with a larger group of people. So that was something when I took over the head coaching job that was really important to me, and it takes a lot of time. But we found a way to balance that as well. So I think it's just working through your time availability and what your team needs from you and finding the balance.
I love that. So granted, the Play for Page Foundation, because I think of their connection with a lot of your athletes, was a team that they identified that they wanted to help if the coach was willing, because just because they wanted it doesn't mean, maybe the coaching staff is certainly the head coach. For you, when did you realize that mindset played a significant role in performance in softball? And when did you realize it was important, and how did you initially go about addressing it?
I mean, I think I've always known it was an important component. I think we've always worked on it within practices, right? Made drills competitive, made drills so that they would test some of those ingredients of the elite mindset, right? Focus drills, things like that. But it's probably been the last few years, maybe the last 5 years, that we've wrapped it in as its own skill set and really spent and blocked out time to work on mindset specifically. And I think it's just because you want to have a fulsome approach to your team plan, right? And you don't want to leave off base running and you don't want to leave off weightlifting. And I think mindset is its own category and it deserves its own amount of time, just like all those other skills.
By working on mindset the last few years, can you put into words what you've observed as a coach that sort of translates to on-field performance because they've worked on their mindset, whether it be concentration, confidence, or composure, those types of things? What kind of things have you observed on the field that was sort of like, oh, that's partly due to the fact that we've been working a little bit harder on mindset than we used to? No different than if you added a drill or two to cover everything, like that drill. That happened because of those drills we've been working on. Okay, what can you put into words what you've observed on the field that because of their mindset work they put in, it's shown on the field?
Yeah, I think composure is a big one. I think you can see that the athletes have an awareness of being able to ride the waves of a game and the momentum pieces. And I think the other thing we see more of is they're handling those mindset struggles as a collective because they have a common language, because they have their core values that they've set. Like they can reset each other, and it's not so much one player not on an island trying to handle her mindset stuff. They're able to talk together and to dialogue and to handle that in the moment as a group much better than when we didn't have that common language.
So you brought up here, my last thought in this series of things is you brought up core values, and I think you've always done them, but it was really kind of challenging them to be thinking through how they could come up with something unique to each one of their teams that sit on top of what you are, the core values of you in your program. And one of their core values this year was green lights. It was a unique one, which is why I bring it up. It's not too often that I have a team come up with a brand new word or phrase that nobody else has ever come up with. In my career, it's the first time any team has ever come up with green lights along with discipline, and there was one other that's kind of stood together as their core values. Could you tell me what green lights meant to this team and how it impacted the team's journey?
Yeah, that came out of a players only meeting, so they had to explain it to me too, because there was a lot of thought and dialogue behind it. Essentially, it means that you're seeing the green lights in situations, that you're not letting challenges halt you, that you're not getting stopped by things that by the red lights, that you're really focusing on the areas where you can move forward and you can continue. And they used that so much this year. When we would have struggles, when we would have games where we lost that we shouldn't have lost, things like that. I'd be in the post-game huddle talking about physical things we could have done better, strategy things I could have done better, all those things where we could correct and move forward. And a lot of times one of the players would pipe up and go, you know what, I don't think we lived our values. And I think that's what caused this game to go the wrong way. They went back to that phrase a lot. And I think it really just helped them see that there's always a way through. And I think green lights was perfect for this group.
I love that. Core values are something that we find important. It gives a team a second scorecard and a language to use on things they have control over, right? Separate from what I call the softball skills that, of course, you're addressing with them every day and figuring out how to do those better. And then we have these non-softball skills that I think determine the final outcome given the talent and all those things. I always say you have to have enough talent to win championships, but it's not the softball skills that determine that. It's who can handle composure and build relationships and reset the best. And of course you have to have the talent and great coaching, or you can reset all you want and it won't matter. But I do find that that's really important for teams today, to have another scorecard to measure things so they don't get so caught up in the wins and the losses, either over attributing a loss to making them break confidence, or be honest, I worry about it more when they start winning games but aren't living who they should become, and they start to think they've arrived. And you as coaches and me are going, we know it's about to happen one of these days. It's about, the dam's about to break, but they don't see it because they're 8-1 right now. We're pretty darn good. We don't even have to do that green light thing we talked about. We win, and then when the pressure hits, we tend to fall. Jess, any additional thoughts or questions that you have for Coach in that line of thinking, or something else?
Yeah, how have you handled, and whether you have a captain's group, leadership team, or maybe it's a collective, maybe sometimes seniors, what happens when maybe an athlete is 50% into mindset, or maybe they have a little bit of apprehension, or does this really work, or I tried this strategy and it's just not working for me? How has your leaders on your team kept, hey, we're not living our core values? Can we lean into those when you're working with a peer?
Yeah, we give some leadership to our seniors, but we don't do a leadership by seniority. So we like to kind of have our leaders naturally rise, and there's on-field leaders and there's there's cheerleading leaders. There's different leaders in different ways, and so we let them figure out who the group is going to be that year pretty naturally. And then when we are struggling with those kind of things, us as coaches will go to those players and be like, hey, here's what we're seeing. What are you guys seeing? And let them handle it. Our players, because they have that mutual respect, really can have pretty open and straightforward dialogues with each other. And this year, this group made culture, just kind of resetting culture and resetting cohesion, one of their main goals. Honestly, they put that way ahead of results-based goals, and so they could continue to point to that. And they just put so much work into being respectful teammates and also putting the team first, that those conversations were really easy this year.
How in the world did they do that? That's a good question. That's a question that I get a lot of. There's a lot of teams making that shift, and whether it be one or the few, but did they do a specific team bonding, or was there something specific that they really leaned on that led to that success? You don't have to share all the secrets, but I was curious, how did that group do that?
I think there was a lot of modeling from our seniors. I think they came in during the summer before we ever had a team meeting and set that as one of their goals, and said, we had graduated out of class that had rewritten the record books, and that was their legacy. And the class before that had taken us to the World Series for the first time in many, many years. And this group of seniors said, like, what our legacy can be is making it, we had culture, we had those things, but really resetting it and making it so, it's just feel good, and you want to be here, and Midland softball means something to you, and you feel uplifted by it. And they just modeled it every single day. Even the days where they didn't feel right, they were still uplifting their teammates. And they spoke it a lot, right? We kept it in front of us. They talked about it pretty constantly throughout the fall. And then anytime something crept into working against that, they handled it. And I think that's, obviously a big piece is you can't let things fester. You can't let small transgressions go because they turn into big transgressions. And so I think there was just a lot of maturity in this senior group and this leadership group, and being willing to handle those things and know what was important for this group specifically.
They own self. They consistently kept it in front of them. They saw it. They talked about it. And Doc, it's right in line with the 3 goals that we work with our teams. 1, no regrets. 2, right, you don't want the season to end. We want to keep our jerseys on, such a special team. And then we want to max out when it matters most. And I know Doc worked with your team very closely, but when I hear you talk, your max out moment, one of the many, was what they did behind the scenes when no one was looking and how they cared for each other and held each other to a standard and accountability. And that's something that maybe no scoreboard or championship or record would ever display, but the heartbeats and the experience that your athletes had this past season, it sounds truly special. Everything else is bonus.
Absolutely. It was.
I know why I love their team so much, right? And I've put out on social media before they played that final game, I said, win or lose, they've already won because they already lived those 3 goals. They had no regrets. That was a team that did not want it to end, right? Well before they made the World Series. They wanted to play another week together. You could see it in them. So here's a 2-part question for you, Coach. Again, requires you to share your truth about what you do well. But first off is, when did you realize you were pretty good at this coaching gig? And then just be honest share with us, what is it about you that has allowed you to be such a great coach? What do you do so well that it has allowed you to have had success at every level?
I think I knew early on. I think I probably knew as a player, pretty solid player, but all the compliments I would get from coaches, whether it was club, high school, college, was, it's like having another coach on the field. They would talk about strategy stuff, things like that. So I knew then that the cerebral part of the game was where I excelled most, and always knew that I had an eye for those kind of things, for matchups and strategy and things like that, mechanics. So that was pretty early on that I was aware of that. And then what do I do well? I feel like we do a lot of things well. I think balance is one, but I think one thing I do well is I don't do too much, right? Like, we have these great athletes. All of the athletes, regardless of their overall talent, they have strengths. They have things they're bringing to the table. We don't try to cookie cutter players. We're not trying to force players to be anything other than what they are. And then just, again, trying to get them to max out and to find that potential and to believe in themselves. I think that's something I do well. And that's why you see a lot of times our teams will start out learning at the beginning of a season or when we get a new group in, and then they're playing much, much better by the end because they've learned to play free and to play with confidence and those kind of things.
That's what I saw. They played with freedom and confidence. They were ranked 20th, 21st, somewhere in there at the end of the season. A very, very good team, no question about it. They weren't your greatest team just from a pure talent standpoint, right? They were a really solid team, but they had to go into Oregon and beat the number 2 team in the country on their home field twice, right? And you kind of heard the combination. I think the culture that the team set and worked on, and then, having great coaching and talent, you put all those together, that gives you a fighting chance, right? Now, that being said, it's hard to make the World Series. Very few teams make it. We get it, right? And you've done it 2 out of 3 years. What's the next step for you? Like, again, I know that if the ultimate goal for any team is to find a way to be the last team standing, what is 1 or 2 things that you think that you or this team could do a little bit better than we've already done? So now I'm nitpicking because we're already talking elite. We're already talking about, in some ways overachieving at times and other times not, but like playing at the highest level in the World Series 2 of the last 3 years, and along the way winning more games in history of this program, even last year. What do you see as the next steps to take this team just 1 more level up?
I think it's it's sustained excellence, right? It's that consistency of, we got through opening round. We had a really great tournament. We had a good body of work throughout the year, but we had some bad losses in the year. We had moments where we did lose focus and we did let moments speed up on us or get to us. And so I think it's, again, increased mental toughness. It's increased discipline of focus. I think those things are huge. And then it's just continuing to challenge ourselves. Once you get to that tournament, it is, it's tough to win it, obviously, but like once you're there, any of the 10 teams can win it. And so I also think some of it's belief. You know, it took us a long time to get back. And then once we were back, here we are 2 years later getting back again. Those things roll over in programs and they uplift the players that are going to come next. So I think we just keep building. We know we're on the right track. And we just make sure we, like this year's group, we don't let outside influences derail us.
I love that. Jess?
In those big moments, right, within the series, how do you keep your team present to soak in the crowd, right, your opponent? How do you keep them so in the moment so they don't, future forward thinking, right? I think those big moments are sometimes, if you've never experienced it, they can be pretty scary. So what are some key things that you helped your athletes stay in that moment, right, that inning, at bat, those little details?
Yeah, this year specifically, it was the struggle prior that allowed us to have a true appreciation for those moments and the fact that we were blessed to still be playing. Because we did not have our best outing at our GPAC conference tournament. We did let the game speed up on us, and I felt good about our body of work and the fact that we would be asked to get an at-large to nationals. But the players truly believe their season was over after that last loss. And we just talked about, if you get the chance to put the jersey back on, to do all the things we talked about, right? The no regrets, to give it everything you have. And so like once we got out there, I really had very little to do because they were truly in that moment of, I'm playing softball today, right? All the other schools have gone home. They're home for the summer. They're doing their summer jobs. Like, here we are playing softball with this amazing team, with my best friends. Like, we're going to play every moment for what it is. And they continued refocusing each other on that. And even in the game we lost, after we talked, the team did the post game, circle, they talked about that. They're like, hey, we weren't in this moment, right? We let the pressure get to us. Like, tomorrow is the last day of softball in Oregon, regardless. Go out and do it the way you want to remember softball. And they were just playing free. Again, free is a word we used a lot this year. They played free. They played to win the game rather than not to lose. And I didn't have to do much other than just recall them back to our values and recall them back to the fact that, they had earned those moments, and not everyone gets those moments. We talk about that a lot. There's a lot of great players at all levels of softball who will go through a career and never get to play postseason softball. And so, the appreciation of that and the fact that you're playing ball, I think that carries them through in those moments.
Gratitude can do some special things, and it puts things in perspective. And so I just like asking that question because you're right, not everybody gets those moments. And I hope listeners heard that you had learned from a struggle, you had learned from a loss. And it doesn't always go that way, and not everybody gets at large or, another second opportunity, but you capitalized on what you were given and you were able to learn and adjust and put together a really successful postseason. So thanks for sharing a little bit more what led to that moment. And struggle was a key word for our listeners, and how you used it was really great.
Yeah, growth through adversity, right, Jess? We always say if you can learn, right, from adversity, it can take you to a place that you haven't been able to go before. And sometimes that allows to play freedom to come in, especially when they've trained confidence all year, and you get that next chance, and you just play free. And I think you saw that if you just knew nothing about the teams. You could just see a freedom in their team, and a battle that when the other team got a little tighter. There's a lot of pressure on when you're the top seed, and so that's kind of my last question on that. I mean, which 2 out of 3 years in the series, right? There is a relative target on Midland's back now, right? There is. How do you anticipate? And you've had to deal with this a little bit the last couple of years, but how do you anticipate navigating having the target on our back so that we're still, and deal with that so we can still play free?
I think it's understanding the way you then have to attack things and changing. It's just being willing to change, right? Because we're not ever going to get anyone's number 3 pitcher, right? And when we see them in these non-conference tournaments, we're not going to catch anyone off guard. Like, we're going to be in a battle every single time. And for teams that are up and coming, we are going to be their World Series in some situations. And so we have to expect everyone's best game all the time. And that's where that consistency piece comes in. You don't get to take a game off, a pitch off, an inning off. You have to be ready to play at all times. And I think sometimes when you're an unknown or an underdog, you can play in spurts, right? You can play in flashes and do things that are big, but you're coming from a spot of anonymity, right? And so you're able to just find those moments. But I think when you are established, it's the consistency piece that keeps you there.
I love that. Jess, any last questions for Coach on your mind?
I think if you look back on it, right, and you shared a little bit more about your coaching journey and what led you to today, what would you tell, right, yourself as you first started coaching? And it really wasn't the traditional way, but you found out, hey, this is where I'm at. This is everything you did prior to today led you to these moments. What would you give a young up and coming coach? What advice?
I would say the same thing I would tell our players, and that's lean into your strengths, right? Like, I'm not an over structured, high intensity yeller coach, right? And sometimes you see that work for other people, or you hear that that's the way you have to go, and you box yourself in because you're not going to ever max out if you're trying to be something you're not. And so I think just understanding what your strengths are, leaning into those, and then always continuing to learn, I think, are the biggest things for a young coach.
Wow. Well, that authenticity, right? I mean, learning to be, I think the best message I heard there for the young coaches and team leaders is you got to be you. And a lot of times we watch other coaches or have had recent success or something like, oh, I need to coach like that, or I need to talk to my team like that. And if that's not you, number one, it doesn't work for you. And two, the team kind of knows we're not being real. So that journey toward authenticity, I think, is another reason probably why you're a great coach, because you kind of knew who you were well before you became the head coach at Midland. Like, you knew what your why was and your mission was, and it's shifted in how you teach that mission. It's with full time with athletes today, but it's the same mission of empowering people. And so, boy, Coach, any last thoughts from you at all?
No, I just appreciate the chance to talk to you guys and appreciate all the work you've done with our teams. It really has been so important in our journey.
Oh, I appreciate that too. I really have, as you know, enjoyed your team, and all 3 years, honestly. I mean, they've all been different journeys, but there was something cool. Of course, recency plays a role, but there's always something cool about the most recent team. And I think it was their authenticity and their vulnerability, and especially from the seniors, like you said, just the way they shared what they were thinking and feeling in the meetings, which allowed for conversations to attack our core values better and go back to the things that they could control, or things that I'll remember, just some of the personalities on your team that separate from the softball personalities, and just who they were as people. So, yeah, I just think you're one of the best coaches I've been around. You're one of the most successful coaches. It's fun to see you do it at different levels, which shows that there's a commonality in how you do things that works. And we really appreciate having you on the podcast as well. So, Coach Singleton, thank you for being on the Max Out Mindset podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Physical abilities such as strength, speed, agility, endurance, and coordination are fundamental in sports. But mental abilities such as focus, concentration, motivation, confidence, resilience, and decision-making can heavily influence an athlete's performance, especially when it matters the most. If you want the mental edge in sport and life, check out the Max Out Mindset for Volleyball book and workbook, or the Max Out Mindset for Softball book and workbook. A guide for coaches, athletes, teams, and parents to help you be in the best position to max out when it matters the most. Go to www.maxoutmindset.com.